All right, we're here with another exciting segment. I've really been looking forward to this. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I've known Matt Solomon for a lot of years. And Matt and I chat, we see each other, but we don't often get to have that deep discussion time together. So now that Matt's wearing a new logo, which I'm sure everybody has already noticed, the first thing I did is I reached out to Matt and I said, Matt, we got to engage. We got to hook up. You got such incredible knowledge of the channel. I want to do a session. And the session is really breaking the revenue barrier. So many MSPs get stuck at their own glass ceiling. And for you, that might be breaking the $1 million mark. It might be breaking the 5 million, 7 million, 10 million, but every MSP solution provider seems to get stuck. And Matt, he's going to be with us here. Matt, glad to have you here. It's really exciting.
Yeah, Dave. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned it. I mean, we have met so many times, probably over the last 5 years, and we catch each other for like 2 minutes at a booth or something, and I think this out honestly might be the first time we're actually talking in like a professional environment online. This is really cool.
No, it is. And you're like, I do so many things online, and oh my gosh, you're like Mr. Online these days yourself. So it's great that we're kind of hooking up live this way as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just like MSPs had to shift with COVID, I had to shift. I was somebody who was at almost 45 to 50 events per year for 2 straight years prior to COVID. And so, yeah, we all had to shift the way we strategize, market, and get in front of customers. So it's been, really interesting, obviously, last year, and things are obviously moving forward now with events, which is great. And I know we're going to talk a lot about those things, and looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, right before we dive in, I was teasing about the new logo, but I'm jazzed for you because it's kind of a different conversation that we're having now, because I view you more on the independent side and out there to help partners. And so why don't you just take a second and share what you'd like to on new logo and kind of your strategy.
Yeah, sure. And for those who may have not know who I am, I've really been a channel chief or product evangelist, whatever you want to call it, really for the last 5 years in the channel for a couple different companies. And now had the opportunity back in June, decided to launch my own consulting company called Channel Halo, working with vendors and MSPs on a variety of services, go-to-market strategies, online presentations, messaging, which I know we'll talk about today. But yeah, it's really unique, Dave, to be able to be vendor agnostic really for the first time. And I've always positioned myself, even though, yes, I was representing a brand, but I always tried to make sure I was educating the MSP and how to also educate their customers. And, I think that's how I built a pretty good reputation, as even though I was representing a brand, that I was also really putting out a lot of education. But now, technically, I'm vendor agnostic, other than my own brand.
No, that's great. And I give you lots of credit because I've always known you to be looking after the partner and sharing it. And that's one of the reasons I reached out so quick to get you engaged. Well, let's kick this off, because I know that everybody is excited to hear you've worked with so many partners, and you really helped so many of them grow. So let's dive into this. I'll kick it off with an easy one, and that is bundles. I mean, bundles is the success story for a partner. Why? And share about that.
Yeah, and I think this has shifted over the last couple of years. When I first got in this, maybe back in 2017, I was hearing about people bundling services, but there was still a lot of MSPs doing one-off sales, and that still exists. Obviously, there's a lot of different maturity levels of MSPs, and when you're in your early days, it's hard to turn down, money, right? So, so it has evolved, but I guess taking one quick step back, what are the actual benefits of bundling? At least, from my perspective, it's, simplifying the offers. And this is really more from a marketing and sales perspective, streamlining the operations. So there's cost efficiencies, and then increased customer interaction. I mean, the more you're engaged with your customer on a variety of different services, the more opportunities there are to one to fix problems, but really you're their go-to person for everything. And there should with that, it's just more opportunities for retention because they know that you're there to help them with all these things. One area, I've seen a lot of MSPs do, and I'd be curious your feedback on this too, Dave, because we saw this kind of like the rise of the different security bundles. Then there was a backup bundle and a compliance bundle. And from my conversations with some of the leaders in this space, a lot of people now are leaning to an all-inclusive bundle, like not breaking it up by categories, because it's almost limiting yourself, and it's just making it more simple. Like this is our bundle. Now you might have levels of that all-in bundle, depending, but still putting it all together, not making it by category. I don't know, Dave, what are your thoughts on that part?
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. I think the first one is partly it's a maturity model.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, when you're a new MSP or you're at a new market, it's hard to turn down business. I mean, I get that. I've been there too. I am there. But on the flip side, I think that a more mature MSP that has a client base, they realize that it's all about the full stack. It's all about the full solution that they know the client needs anyway.
Yep.
And the question is, are they willing and are they able to I don't want to say hold out, but are they able to focus on clients that will leverage that full stack, and therefore they're going to be a full answer. They're going to be a full solution, and they can go to market with a full solution. By no means is it necessary, meaning like you said, you might have a security stack and you go to market and you gain clientele, because I think you'll agree with me, it's much easier to sell to an existing client additional services and products than it is to land a net new client. So if you get your foot in the door with a smaller bundle, awesome. But as you mature and you can be a little bit more selective, the full bundle is the honest business answer, and it's going to increase the value of your MSP long term as well.
Yeah, and I think we have to be an MSP always, and this is really for anybody really. You have to be careful assuming people won't buy an all-in bundle. I've been going through it myself. Starting this business. Use GoDaddy for example, right? Yeah, you could just buy the website, but now they offer so many things, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to have to do 20 different vendors for this. So I wanted the all-in option. I wanted everything DNS hosting and things like that. So there is that opportunity, to be careful on assuming. And I think, obviously it's hard always to ignore what's gone on in the world. I think MSPs have certainly gotten their stamp of approval. I mean, from the federal government, right? Yep. Calling them, necessary. I can't remember the exact term, but necessary businesses. So I think it's a really important time for MSPs, or a really great time to have those options available, because I think the end user, the customer, really trusts them probably more than ever.
You're right on, and especially with security and cyber, and it's everywhere in the news. I mean, we don't have to dive into that one at all because it's a given. And so this is a good segue. So I'm 100% with you on the bundles. It's the way to go. And so we'll tweak it a little bit. What do you think partners are doing to invest so that their message is differentiated from another partner? What do you see that they're doing? Yeah,
so this is certainly an area I think any MSP can really differentiate themselves. The messaging on how they're out in the market. So one of the things that I've noticed. So we kind of talked about bundling. So standardizing on tool sets and making certain things mandatory. One of the things I've noticed personally, going to MSP websites is they're all the same. And of course, I don't mean like they actually are all the same, but they're very similar.
And from the client perspective, they appear to be the same.
They appear to be the same, and it talks about a bunch of products and services, and it doesn't always address, the customer and making them the priority. So a customer needs to come to your website and really understand how these products are going to help them run their business on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's one kind of low-hanging fruit, is to really revamp your website and make it more about the customer and less about you as the company. And really the same goes for presentations. this is honestly for vendors and MSPs.
Mhm.
I sit at events, all the time, and I listen to vendors and MSPs speak, and just sometimes the messaging is off. Maybe the conversation's too technical. I spoke about this all the time. I obviously worked for ID Agent for 2+ years. Dave, I'm not a security expert, but I was talking to MSPs that know more about security probably than me about dark web monitoring and what it meant to the end user. But I was speaking, I guess, in layman's terms, right? And
Mhm.
my message to them was, the way I'm speaking to you is how you need to speak to your end user, because they're not going to, I don't understand it. They're not going to understand it. And so it's just tweaking the messaging, making sure that you're speaking the right language to your end customers. I think that's a really big way that MSPs can differentiate themselves.
One of the messages I heard, and I don't know who said it, but they were spot on, and that is, a confused shopper is not a buyer. So
Mm-hmm.
in other words, if they're confused by your offering, they're not going to buy it. And if they're confused by your bundle, because it's not about the speeds and the feeds and the screwdriver, like you said, it's about the impact of what that will do for their business. And if you can learn to convey it that way, then you're going to close more deals with those bundles, because you know how to deliver the message. I mean, I think you're spot right on.
Yeah. And another thing I was just thinking about, leverage your vendors. Some vendors are putting out incredible content. Some vendors allow you to borrow their staff, essentially, like for events.
Mhm.
I did that several times, and we did it, by the way, several times with somewhat competing vendors at events, because at the end of the day, it's about our customer. And that's a great way, obviously, to also differentiate yourself, because you're bringing in people from the outside space, and for whatever reason that resonates with people a lot of times. You're bringing in a security expert, about backup. You're bringing in a security expert that talks about the dark web. So those are really cool ways to differentiate yourself. And I can speak for when I was on the vendor side. Our MSPs that leveraged the human resource of us, had some of the most incredible success stories that we had over the last couple of years.
I love that, because the truth is, one vendor can't satisfy client needs that an MSP needs to deliver, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of teaming. I see it in webinars. I see where you might get two or three. I was just watching a webinar a few days ago, and there were three, I'll use the word vendors. There were three vendors on that webinar, and they were kind of tag teaming. And
Yep.
obviously they weren't direct competitive. They were doing complementary services, right? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
key. But that they were teaming to deliver one message that MSPs and solution providers could adopt and bring to their client by leveraging all three of them together. And I thought it was great.
Yeah. I mean, right now, as we're talking, come out with a security day, invite a bunch of your customers, have your vendors participate. I mean, again, whether they're competing vendors or not, they each have a kind of a product line that that
Yep.
specifically is you're highlighting. Have them focus on that, and it's an educational talk track. They're not there. Ultimately, your job at the end of that is to sell it. Sorry, my screen froze. I'm still here. um,
Okay, no problem.
but you're ultimately there to sell at the end at the end of it. But bring them in, and I think that's a really great way to, again, separate yourself.
Yeah, yeah. This is another awesome segue. Social selling. And I take my hat off. You, in many ways, just burn up social selling, meaning you have a great presence online. You really do.
Thank you.
Do you see MSPs also creating a presence online? And if so, what do you think they're doing that's making them stand out and be successful with it? Where do you see the home run hit versus don't do this?
So definitely starting to see a shift. There are some MSPs that are absolutely killing it right now, and it's very noticeable. And it's noticeable, Dave, because most aren't doing it. Even in the spectrum, forget the MSP world, the spectrum of businesses. I think I read a stat, about 1% of users on LinkedIn are actively posting like once a week, which to
Yeah.
me, like, as somebody who does post, I'm just like, oh yes, like this is incredible, because that means I'm beating 99% of the people, right? And so this is just huge opportunity for me to stand out, and it has worked. It has made me stand out. I tell you, people used to come up to me all the time at ID Agent and say, "Man, you guys are everywhere, Matt. You're at everything." And in the COVID world, I started getting that response virtually. People would say, "You're everywhere," and that was the perception. I wanted to I wanted to take it by like force. And so there's putting out volume. I mean, there's a lot of people, if you go on LinkedIn and see MSPs, there's a lot of people who are just putting out content every day, and it's hard not to notice. And what's really interesting, Dave, is that you'll find that people that have never interacted, like never given you a like or never given you a comment, are still paying attention to your videos, and you'll get a message a year later and say, "Hey, I've been watching you for the last year." Right? It's part of that buyer's journey of, it's not always the right time today, but it could be 6 months from now. And it's just a blue ocean opportunity. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on where MSPs could go with this, but the fact remains 74% of B2B buyers research before they make a purchasing decision. And LinkedIn is 100% one of those places they go. And I think a lot of MSPs get turned off from LinkedIn because most people do it the wrong way. And when I say that, it's the salespeople that are doing it the wrong way. And what's happening is a business owner is getting bombarded by a bunch of sales messages, right? Where it's just boom, boom, comes, that you connect with somebody and instantly they're in sales mode. Well, that's the quickest way to lose a connection. I delete those people immediately, but it turned a lot of people off of LinkedIn for a variety of reasons. And what I'd say is, if that many people are doing it wrong, again, there's that opportunity, because if you do it the right way, you connect with people, you provide them value and content, then there's the possibilities are really endless. And I'd position, and I'll get off my soapbox for a minute. I was kind of thinking like in an interview, when you go to interview somebody, when they come in and they know things about you, it's really impressive. You're like, all right, they did their homework. I mean, you shouldn't be that impressed, because it's like, that's bare minimum.
You should be
doing
expected, but not that many people actually do it.
Right. But like LinkedIn is just an absolute treasure trove of information about a prospect or your customer. You could literally walk into a meeting and know they've got an event coming up in a week. They're security focused because you keep talking about security with their customers. I mean, you can find the connection on, hey, we went to the same college. It's just all sitting there. I don't even understand why people don't use it. It's like a cheat code, honestly, and it's just sitting there. So yeah, I mean, I'm all in on LinkedIn.
You'll get me going in a good way, because I'm all there with you. And I post too, and I try to post things like you said that bring value, that are educational. And I think if people realize your knowledge when you talk and you share, they begin to realize, hey, Matt knows that. And therefore, when they have a need, they're going to reach out and say, I know who knows that. Matt does. And regardless if you're teaching or sharing something industry or your brand related, the bottom line is they're still going to relate the fact Matt knows that. And the other one is they miss out on this low hanging fruit. Like you said, 1% of people are really engaged on the LinkedIn platform. I mean, they may have 700 million people, but it's 700 million people that are not really, like you said, that are deeply engaged. And you can tell the people that are the thought leaders. I mean, you're one of the thought leaders.
Yeah.
And you can really tell the difference. The other thing I kind of noticed, or I'll add, is that when people only post once a month, realize that things only live in social world about a day and a half.
Yeah.
And if you're only online, like so many people are, once a month, you miss the majority of the content, for starters. So you have to be posting quite often in order for those odds to rise up, that people are going to see that thought leadership that you're sharing.
Yeah.
If you share one thing once a month, most people will never see it.
Absolutely. And I think it's important, not to get lost in that 1%. That's the 1% that are actually putting out content. It doesn't mean 1% of the users are, because there's a lot of people reading content. But that was a great point, Dave, the once a month post, because one, you're also not getting rewarded by their algorithm. There's lots of research on the algorithms of LinkedIn. But, for instance, if you make that post at the wrong time in that once a month that you did, I mean, it's just going to die. It'll like instantly. And kind of, I guess, a funny story. Well, I think it's funny, but I want to tell people it's because I want to encourage people who've put out content before and maybe it didn't go as well as they thought. Couple of things on that. One, you don't have to be perfect. As you said, it's gone in 48 hours, generally speaking. You'll fail at posts. When I say fail, I just mean like you'll have a post that you're like, this is a good one. This is good. And I had it the other day, Dave. I swore I thought it was going to go gangbusters. And it was because it was about newsletters. It was asking a question about newsletters. And I figured everybody has a newsletter. They'll comment. Yeah, it was like crickets. It got like nothing. But what I've often found,
I really hate when that happens. I really do. And then, I get a tease right beside it. Somebody posts about their dog and it gets 1,000 likes.
Exactly.
And 300 comments.
Yeah. And so pictures do really well. Videos do really well as well. But, it's interesting. I've done a post where, again, the video didn't do that well, but I actually messed up a bunch of times when I was recording it. And so I did a blooper reel afterwards. And the blooper reel did go gangbusters. And one, it's because it's funny, but it's also relatable. And so what I found is all these people were responding like, "Oh my God, I'm glad you posted this," because they assume that because I speak a lot, that I'm just like, oh, I just go one cut and I'm good on some of these videos, but that's not the truth. And so I wanted to show the real truth behind it is like, yeah, sometimes I mess up too. And it really resonated with people. And friends, family, customers, prospects, all still tell me, "Oh, I loved that video."
I'm with you. Matter of fact, I would encourage that when a solution provider is recording something on social media designed for their client to be watching, let it be natural.
Yes.
So in other words, if you cough. If you stumble and lost your thought, you say, "Lost my thought. Oh, I got it again." But my point is, don't edit that out because it makes you human, right? Yeah. And I think that's why you get all the comments, because people are beginning to better relate because they mess up or they stumble or you get the idea. It's not perfect. And again, I don't know who said it, but I love the idea. Don't wait until it's perfect to implement or do it. If you mess it up, like you said, 48 hours, it's gone anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just, it's about being authentic. And some of it, I also like behind the scenes type of stuff. So like, if I'm just thinking, if I was an MSP, bring people around your office, the video, in a video, introduce them to some of their, help desk people that they maybe don't, haven't seen before, or, especially during COVID. So bring them behind the scenes and make them, 60 to 90 second clip videos. And just bring people into your world. I think it makes a world of difference.
So I want to dive in more on that. I love this. So marketing ideas, hit us with a couple marketing ideas. Like I liked the one you said, bring them into the office. I mean, with COVID, we had an issue. we're getting rid of that, which is thumbs up. But like you said, bring them into the office and while they're there, capture them on a short video clip and use that in your promotion. What are a couple other marketing ideas that you can think of? And
actually when I said bring them in, I meant through video, not even actually physically, like actually show them, your offices and things like that. So that's one idea. Yeah. So content is always content's king, right? That's what everybody says, at least. And everybody, MSPs, vendor, it doesn't matter, solution providers, everybody struggles coming up with content. Like, all right, this all sounds great, but what am I going to do? Well, one, look at some of the leading vendors in the space. They put out incredible research based on MSP responses about the industry, and find nuggets that are of value to your customers. Another example is the Verizon data breach report. I mean, that is just pages. Yeah, it's pages of content. So, Dave, I would say most people, when they see like a top 10 list, right? Those are very popular, right? Top 10 reasons you need this. They see one video post that they could do about it. I see 10 video posts. Because why read all 10 and give commentary when you could do one every day for the next 10 days or something like that? I mean, maybe you split up the list to 5 and 5, whatever you want to do. But,
Right.
And then the beauty of that is you can also transcribe those videos. I'm a big believer in taking one piece of content and making it multiple pieces of content. So transcribe that video and maybe it's a blog post now.
You're talking about repurposing content. I
Yeah.
love that idea because I mean, you could repurpose it not only in how you deliver it, but like you said, the format. Make it a blog.
Yeah.
Make it a social post. Make it a newsletter item. Make it a
Yeah.
lunch and learn item. But repurpose instead of recreate.
Yeah. And then, if you do like a Zoom seminar or whatever, or if it's a lunch and learn, perhaps you're doing a Zoom webinar, take the content, you could put it on YouTube so it has a life there. You could also take that video, take the audio from the video, make it part of a podcast. Now that's if you have a podcast and things like that. But I'm just saying, to your point, the repurposing is kind of endless. There's so many different opportunities. And really, I think by doing that, you're creating this, the evergreen digital content, which is so critical, right? One, it's good for SEO, I believe, but then also, it's always going to be available. So when somebody goes back, for instance, I have seen lots of MSPs actually starting YouTube channels and podcasts. But what ends up happening, Dave, I might find your YouTube clip, 36 episodes in. If I really like it, a lot of people will go back and they'll watch the first 35 episodes because they really like the content. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and YouTube is really an interesting one. I'm seeing a lot more MSPs starting to take advantage of as well.
Right. So I was kind of peeking at the chat window, and I didn't mean to ignore that. So two things I'm going to say. Number one is you got to catch up to Matt when we have the expo time. And Matt has a virtual booth there. He's got his video turned on, much like what's happening now. So turn on your video and go engage Matt and ask questions. But one of the things I want to ask is referrals. So a lot of MSPs are still relying on referrals, and that is what they call their marketing. And what would you say? I mean, are you thumbs up? Are you saying that's a mistake, and why? What's your take on just working with MSPs that have that as their marketing business model?
Yeah. Well, first off, if yeah, and I was doing some research on this, looking at a lot of the posts that people were putting. There was a lot of polls that people have put out about what's your biggest form of lead generation, and unequivocally, like always, referrals, and it was like 50% or higher always. And one, I mean, that's great news, right? In the sense of like you're doing something right if you're getting referrals from your customers. But I think if you're depending on referrals for the rest of your 20 years in existence or whatever your plan is, I think it ultimately is a recipe for business stagnation, because eventually those referrals do dry up. I mean, there's different periods. It's just like a friend, right? You have moments with a friend where like 3 months you're inseparable, and then all of a sudden you haven't spoken in 6 months, and it's nothing that anything went wrong. It's just whatever, life happens. And I think that can be the same way with referrals. Look, there's always going to be an MSP who will hit me back and say, well, it doesn't matter. I've been running a successful business for 20 years. And look, that's if that's the case, hats off. That's amazing. But I think ultimately, if you're really trying to grow, particularly if you're a less mature MSP in the moment right now, you need to have that multi-touch lead generation. Whether that's referrals, social, which we talked a lot about, obviously emails, calling, events. So you really have to kind of hit it everywhere in order. So, I mean, Dave, I'd be curious as well what your thoughts are from that perspective.
I've learned that most solution providers got into business in the first place two ways. Number one, they had the knowledge because they were an employee at some company. And they're like, I can be my own boss. I can do that. Number two is that they knew somebody that would hire them, meaning, they again, it's kind of that referral kind of thing. They knew a lead that said, oh, you want to do that? I'll hire you. And that's how they got their first clientele, was from that people they knew or referrals. To me, they kind of go hand in hand. And, because it's that personal relationship, if you will, either
Yep.
because you were referred somebody or somebody referred you, but it's kind of a personal relationship. That's how most solution providers got started. Now
Yeah.
that they got started, they want to hire a team because they don't want to do all the work, and nor can they. Well, as you start hiring a team, you have more mouths to feed. The volume of that referral base doesn't really feed the mouth of the team that you really need to put in place. And that's why you need other marketing strategies, because that's how you scale, that's how you grow. And this is a good segue because we still have several minutes left here, but let's bring it to another question, and that is, how do they leverage branding? So if they want to go
Mhm.
past that personal referral, and hey, take them all day long. They're not bad,
Yep.
they're great. But if you want to scale and you want to grow and you want to position yourself to sell, you're going to have to go beyond the referrals.
Yep.
So chat about how branding can help them increase MRR.
Yeah, and this thought just occurred to me as you were talking, and it kind of blends with both questions that we had just talked about, which is the lost opportunity. So yes, you might be getting a bunch of referrals, but what are you not getting by not being out there, right? As a thought leader, because that's the
Yeah.
stuff that's like just amazes me, is like when you actually put yourself out there, you might land the biggest deal of your life. That wasn't a referral base. It was just because you actually did that multi-touch. You actually put yourself out there. And that's where I do think thought leadership, I know it's kind of a buzzword for some people, but I think it's so important. There's so many opportunities if you're just a little proactive about it too. One, depending on the different vendors you work with, there's really interesting topic areas that you can speak on, and a lot of times your vendors can help you. So, obviously, I came from the dark web monitoring side, so that
Mhm.
was like such a home run from a speaking standpoint, because very few people could call themselves, a thought leader on the dark web. So one of the things we would talk about is, reach out to your local, news affiliates. Make sure that they are aware of you, right? Don't just get on a list. Proactively reach out and say, here are the things that if you need somebody, here are the 5 topic areas that I can speak on, right? Newspaper articles. I know it's a little bit old school, but again, I guess my point is that everybody is thirsty for content, and the easier you can make it for them, you would just be surprised by just being part of their Rolodex, right?
Yep.
Like you'll get opportunities. I can speak to it from personal examples of, when I would want to put together an MSP panel. And this would happen often. And I'd want 2 or 3 MSPs. And of course, I have my go-to list. But if an MSP had reached out to me, and sometimes I would put out messages, say, hey, we're looking for MSPs who are looking to talk on this topic. But if there was an MSP out there and said, hey, I've seen some of your panels, I'd love to participate in it, I'd immediately flag them on my list. And then the next one opportunity that came up, I wanted to put them on because, one, I enjoy hearing from different people. I think it's important hearing from different backgrounds of MSPs and size MSPs. So a lot of it was just, really, I think, is just putting yourself out there, and just understanding that, you, realizing that you're a lot smarter on these certain topic areas than most people, and maybe you're afraid, maybe have a little trepidation about speaking in front of people, and there's programs like Toastmasters. I did Toastmasters probably 20 years ago. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity, but what it ultimately does is it establishes trust in your network, and that's when things start to come together.
Yeah, I love it. And I'll share a couple things. First of all, I'll give a shout out, kind of a common friend in the industry, Channel Pro Magazine.
Yeah.
And Channel Pro, I mean, they are content creators. They need content. And a lot of you might know I wear a couple hats in the industry. I do SMB TechFest, but I also have a 25-year MSP business. And on the MSP business, I had the blessing that I chatted with Channel Pro, and I've been quoted in quite a few of the magazines, and providing thought leadership. And for branding, other MSPs can do the same thing. They can reach out and they can say, hey, I have an opinion, I have thought. on this upcoming article or on this article, and get your word out there. The other one, a lot of us know Rob Ray. I'm a Rob Ray fan, and in different companies that Rob's been at, I've been up on stage with the person talking. And again, it only happened because you have to reach out and say, I have some thoughts on this and I'd like to be able to share them. And then people like yourself or Rob or the channel pros of life, they'll let your voice be heard. It's an excellent way to get your branding. And like you said, you may not be comfortable standing on stage, but you can be quoted in a magazine. So
Yeah.
there's different levels that you can engage.
Yeah, and the vendor community for MSPs is a really good place to start. Like you said, Dave. I mean, you mentioned Rob, but like, it's I think it's a very overlooked area of trying to build relationships with your vendors. Lisa Shore, for example, and I think you may have had her as a speaker at one point.
Yes.
So I've established a great relationship with her. So like I know what she talks about now. So when opportunities present themselves, I was like, hey, you should get Lisa for this, for example. And, I know she's doing a webinar for one of the Kaseya products where she's is a thought leader in that webinar. So it's putting it out there, making sure that people know that you're an expert in this, because you wouldn't, there's so many opportunities out there and so many people. You mentioned Channel Pro. I mean, I've had times where, yes, I've reached out proactively. It's not, look, they don't always take my pitches, right? Like I have had pitches, they're like, yeah, maybe. But there's been times where they've featured me and it just put your name out. And then obviously that builds more credibility. You can put that in your LinkedIn profile. You can highlight it. You can put it out on social media. I mean, that's obviously a big thing, is you want people to know that you're doing these things and you're being, thought of in that way.
So, and it's funny that you brought up Lisa Shore, because she's actually part of the show today, which is really exciting.
Oh, perfect.
And so the timing is really great. So we're almost out of time. I'm going to give you in just a second final thought, but before I give final thought, I just want to remind everybody, this is a whole new way. I'm excited to have this chat time with Matt. I kind of feel like we can have an agnostic conversation together, and I love it. And so I'm going to encourage all of you during the expo time to also go engage and pick Matt's brain and get his insights and let him, chat with you. This is what we like to do. This is how we all make our living together. And so catch up to him for sure. And Matt, as we kind of wrap up time, I'm going to give you last words. So you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, a lot of my background comes in sales and marketing and social selling. And I've been super passionate about helping MSPs, get better at that. And so one, I would just encourage every MSP that's listening, if you haven't really put yourself out there from a social perspective, there's a huge opportunity. Don't be afraid to fail. We all do. And, please consider me a resource. I've the one advantage I've had is I've talked to, I don't know, it seems like thousands over the last couple of years. I'm a big proponent of, you take stories of success and you just reshare them with people, and you can do them different ways, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So there's just lots of really neat things that MSPs are doing and have had a lot of success. And I'd say just as important as the success stories are, taking the ones that were more of a failure in the moment and avoiding kind of the mistakes that were made, and sharing those with you, because I think, taking certain steps of like, hey, this is what worked and here's what didn't work. I think both sides are just as valuable sometimes.
I love the storytelling. I mean, that's my takeaway actually, is forget the speeds and the feeds and relate, be relatable storytelling. Yeah. I love it. I think that's a great place to end it right there.
Absolutely.
Is the storytelling. Matt, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing the time with me. I love the interaction. I know we'll hook up live soon. Live as in,
yes. In person. Yes.
In person. But totally awesome time. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate the opportunity. And thank you to everyone listening.
Yep. And we're going to transition.